Hi, this is Paul, and welcome to part 2 in the All About Eyes tutorial series. In this tutorial, I will show you how to dilate the pupil of the eye using parenting in After Effects. Now, if you've been following my tutorial on how to create this iris here, then you already saw how to do all of this cool stuff. And if you didn't see that one, I highly recommend watching that first so you know what I'm talking about. Alright, so you can see the effect that we're going for here. I pre-rendered the animation of the pupil, and you can see that the strands actually move with it. It's not a simple, masking or scaling trick. The strands are actually changing. It looks like they're pulling on it, like a real iris. And that's why I really recommend doing a dilation effect this way, instead of just scaling it up, which is a lot easier and faster, but it doesn't look as good. Alright, so let's get right into it. I am going to start using my previous comp as a baseline, so I'll just duplicate that, and I'll take out some of the elements that I don't need here. So I don't need these glows, I don't need the effects on the background, I don't need to see this effect, and I don't need this many strands to set up the effect. So I'm going to drop this down to about 300 and just increase the thickness and drop the density. That way I'll still kind of see what the effect is doing, but I'll be able to move along quickly at full quality. Okay, and I can hide this one. So what we're going to do is we're going to parent the length of the strands to the movement of the strands. So I'm Alt and then clicking on the stopwatch for both of these. That brings them into the timeline quickly. I'm just going to click on the iris and type U, which exposes just those parameters. Alright, so next I'm going to grab the pick whip on the length, which is this thing here, and drag it to the move progress parameter. Alright, so we're almost done. What we need to do now, though, is actually disable the parenting so we can see what the maximum and minimum values for these strands needs to be. Because if you start moving your strands out, you don't want them to fly away from your iris. So we need to put some limits in here. So first of all, let's find out how far out can the strands go. And it looks like they can go about this far. So that is pretty accurate, and that is about 50. So we're going to take that expression in this line here and divide it by 50. Okay, so that's half of the equation. Now we're going to disable this equal sign and find out how long should the strands be. So at a movement of 0, let's find out how long they can go without going beyond the iris. And that is about 0.9. Even that goes a bit beyond, so let's say about 0.93. So I'm just going to click in here, go to the start of the expression, and say 0.93 subtracted from the rest of it. And now, like magic, if I scrub this, the strands stay in place, but they get shorter. And that's really the hardest part of the whole thing. Okay, next, of course, we want the pupil to be increasing as the strands are moving. So we go to our pupil effect here, we find the scale, and we do the same alt-click on the stopwatch, and the same hitting U there. And again, we're going to link that to the move progress as well. Now, this time, we need to make sure that the scale of this number, pun intended, I guess, matches the scale of this number. So we have about 50 equals about 12. So doing a tiny, tiny bit of algebra, we see that that equals about 4.1. Okay, almost perfect. And you can just check it by increasing this. And one thing I forgot to do is I forgot to turn off the radial wipe. Now let's see. Okay, and if it looks like it's, changing at a slightly wrong rate, as this one is, you can just tweak this number. You could, of course, actually use a calculator and find the exact number, as I didn't do because I'm recording this live. But you get the idea. All right, so I'm just going to go with good old 4. Okay, now we can't really use the radial wipe to soften this edge like we had before, so I'm just going to use a matte choker. And just blend it a bit. And we should be good. And there we have a nice dilation effect. Now there is one other element that can be linked here. These strands on top, you could very easily link these to the whole thing we have going on here, because all you need to do in this case is change the movement progress. So you just have to identify the proper scale between the two. So this time, just going to parent that to the move progress as well. And we have about 20 and 8. So let's say this scale should be plus 12. Because these are the same parameter, you don't really have to do a lot to make them coexist. If they're different by a value, you just enter in what value they are different by. And that's the end of the parenting. So now that that's all set up, I can re-enable all the effects I disabled at the beginning of the tutorial, and I can increase the strand count again so the iris looks nice and full. So stay tuned for more tutorials, and if you like what you see here but don't own the product, you can download a free trial version at borisfx.com.